Okay, it's asking me. I got it. Yeah, there we go.
All right, so welcome, Matt. Welcome everybody that's watching to our first broadcast for FSD Nation. So we're here to do some topic talking and just some things on self-defense related topics that are kind of hitting the world. And right now, the topic we're going to get into is the teenage swarming and multiple attackers. So the last couple months, there's been quite a few random attacks on people, and it's a lot to do with teenage swarming, which also deals with multiple attackers, which I know, Matt, you're a specialist in for all your training and background. So let's get right at it and figure out some strategies here of what you would do in these situations.
Yeah, I guess I could introduce myself a bit. I just retired after 20 years in the forces. Of course, I won't rehash our relationship, except that we've known each other since I was a teenager. Maybe you were just in your early 20s.
Yeah.
And I used to fight for a living, and then was obviously training with you and training with other people in the Kitchener area. But then as I grew into the military, in the infantry and the combat arms, multiple attackers in hand-to-hand combat wouldn't be a topic for the combat arms in the military. They do portions of it, but they assume that you're going to have your firearms and or a fire team partner and support. They don't expect you to be by yourself. But then eventually I moved to working close protection, which working close protection and teaching bodyguard work, being caught off guard by yourself is a primary problem for an individual operator by himself. So then we ended up and then I went from there teaching use of force for the military police and defensive tactics for the close protection unit. The difference between our conversation, I guess, with trained professionals and a civilian would be completely different.
Right.
Meaning like we're gonna have to reach out to civilian people and be like, the truth is, can't be a weak target. And how do you not be a weak target? I guess we could discuss first.
Okay.
What would constitute a weak target? And then I just thought about this now as a father. Even though I have all this training, the worst case scenario for me is to have my 6-year-old son caught in that scenario.
Right.
Or something, if you're a woman with a newborn baby, and then your priority is to protect the baby, then you're obviously not being completely vicious to get out of the situation. Does that make sense what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, completely. And I think multiple attackers, usually when we talk about with training, it's always with adults, right? So it's a little bit different. But now what's going on in the news is these attacks are with teenagers or younger. So a bit of the question is always like, how much force do you use? But we both know that you can be overwhelmed by more than 1 or 2 people. And if you get 5 or 6 or 7 on you, it's going to be very tough to work that whole situation out without hurting somebody.
Just to add to that, excessive force is a chargeable offense.
100%.
So, and that is something that they have to worry about. But then you're gonna have to. That silly statement to be judged by 12 or carried by 6. It's a silly thing to say, but at that point, that is a reality.
It is, yeah, and you're not going to have the luxury of thinking for like a couple of minutes on what you're going to do. It's going to be in the moment, and it's going to quickly happen. So you're either going to respond appropriately, or you're going to end up on the bad end of it. And just being prepared. I guess awareness is going to be key to see if you can see these things kind of approaching before they happen. But a lot of times they use a little bit of trickery in there, where they're going to distract you or something, or they're going to do something with somebody else, and you may have intervened to help, and then all of a sudden you're the victim.
Because if you go down the rabbit hole, to add to what you just said, they would say that ideally escaping would be the primary idea. And if you're not escaping, to constantly keep moving, so you're not a station target, which I don't want to jump the queue for what to do when you get into it. But my brain is thinking about the possibility of, imagine being caught as a single parent or a parent, and you can't escape because you have a toddler or you have a child. So then you have to turn around and engage it head on. And that would be the worst case scenario. But you don't really have much options at that point. And then what do you do? Right.
No. Yeah. And basically at that point, you do have the right to protect. I mean, if you have a child or someone that can protect themselves, and you're being swarmed by a bunch of people, you have to do something. But like I said, the difference here is that this isn't adults, this is teenagers. So
which are men and women at that age, because of the proper weight size. Maybe not emotionally at the level, but they're definitely physically at the level.
Right.
They're not
And
really, yeah, I agree with you.
so,
I'll give you a quick story recently.
Yep.
Last summer, I was in Hamilton, just relaxing, visiting family alone. So it was in the middle of the afternoon. We're on vacation. So I opened up a cup of whiskey and I was reading a book on a balcony, on my parents' balcony. Brittany could watch my kids. They were 6 and 5 across the street at the park. And they were swarmed by a bunch of 12 to 15-year-olds that went up to them. Probably, Britt, how many people were in the park? 10?
The kids?
Yeah.
Well, there was like 8 to 10 of them.
8 to 10
They
kids.
were 7 and 6.
So they went to go pick on 2 little kids. We're talking 5 and 6.
7 and 6.
7. Well, Brittany's, my wife's here. 7 and 6. Okay. And they swore at the kids to get off the park slide.
Right.
But Brittany could hear it and see it. She was about a 50 meters away. I don't even know how she heard it, but she could see it. And then I went over and they didn't want to mess with me. I mean, being an adult man versus some 15-year-olds. It's funny because when I walked over there was one Jurassic kid that was probably 6'3". And I'm like, please don't be that kid. Turned out to be a smaller kid in the group. And I was like, can that kid get any bigger? But swarming can happen at any age in this capacity, because if we weren't there monitoring our kids, which we were only, it's an open view, so we could see it.
Right.
Those kids were in danger by a bunch of kids that were double their age.
Sure.
Yep. Which is, I've never heard of that. I don't remember a bunch of pre-teens beating up on kids for playing on a slide would be something completely unique to me. Yeah. Yeah,
I know that last summer or the summer before here, the area that my business is at here is not always sometimes the best area, and sometimes the kids get bored. So they were causing some issues inside the club here. So I followed them over to the park the one day after they'd been in here, and they were swearing at me and they were saying all kinds of things, and they literally started to surround me. And I was watching what was going on, going, is this actually happening? And they're all looking at me, and I'm like, I don't think this is going to work out well for anybody. But they were young, like they were between 8 to 12, and they were
8 to 12, yeah. 12,
and they were fully looking to encircle me, right? And I don't know where it was going to go from there, but I kind of just laughed and I came back into the club. But I mean, if it was somebody different, they could have very well easily swarmed, right? So
I felt at that time that in our childhood that never would have happened.
No, because it's not part of when we grew up, for sure.
Because I felt like there was more authority for your parents to get physical. I'm not saying it's appropriate, but that's what it would have been. And they would have had their parents wreak hell on them, or it would have been understandable for the adult to get physical to defend the little kid. In my situation, I couldn't imagine a bunch of 13-year-olds beating up on a 6-year-old and me not getting physically involved. But now they don't seem to have that worry, or at least in the scenario that I had anyway.
They don't seem to carry the respect, and they don't seem to care, right? And for them to come into my business and start swearing while I'm teaching classes and then running back out the door, like this was going on for a couple of weeks.
That is so rude. Absolutely.
Yes. I mean, because I had parents in the lobby, there was younger children on the floor. Like it went on for a little bit, so it was a bit of a problem for sure. The police did have to get involved, but yeah, I mean, they literally started to surround me in the park by the club, and I'm just kind of smiled. I'm like, this is not actually happening, but it was happening, right? So if it happens, it'll happen to other people, and I'm sure they've done it to kids as well.
To add to that, I wrote a little question for ourselves to discuss, like, where would your percentage of getting most multiple attacks? So I wrote like a list of problems that would have happened to somebody if they were to get attacked by a swarm of people. And I suggested maybe schools for kids, which would make sense, or colleges and high schools, which I was at one time in my grade 9 year.
Right.
I had to switch high schools when I was a kid because I got beat up by a bunch of kids that were in a couple grades older. I was a grade 9. In grade 9, I was literally 3 feet tall and maybe 80 pounds tops. And these kids were like 16, 17. I was 14. Wow. And 6 of them beat me up in a locker, and they continued to harass me for a long time. I had to switch high schools in grade 10. But that's a long story. That's how I ended up really taking my self-defense much more seriously.
Yes.
But I would say a bar, trains, which we saw at the train station.
Yep.
shitty parts of town. I'm from Hamilton, so we have an area called Barton Street.
Yeah.
Barton is renowned for being dangerous. You don't really want to be down there alone at certain times of the day.
Sure.
I would say police responding to any call would be
Yeah.
A situation where they could get possibly swarmed. I didn't put in close protection, but a bodyguard in a role could obviously end up swarmed by multiple assaults. I said dance clubs like bouncers tend to throw themselves into problems, riots and protests. That's kind of what I came up with, some ideas.
Yeah. You know, and then add in the park by the club. Right. But I mean, even on a different, like homeless people. I mean, this happens to them as well because they're not able to protect themselves. And they're already vulnerable, and people know that. Unfortunately, things that we would never do, other people don't seem to care, and then there's that lack of respect, or there's no borders put in place for people not to do things anymore, and there's really no punishment for when things happen, right? We were talking there, we don't know for sure, but we think that's criminals getting arrested, and then they're being released the same day or a day later, out on bail, and they're back doing whatever they were doing. So the justice system hasn't stepped up to where it needs to be because they're people just aren't scared of getting in trouble. So the very lack of consequence.
I wonder what it is. Well, I do know people don't want to hear about this, and this is a topic for another day. But fatherless homes, I just watched a whole biography on this, and 90% of people in prison, 90% are raised by fatherless homes.
Wow.
We're in a culture, from our culture of our age demographic to where we are now, where it's very common that 80% of your friends come from divorced homes.
Right.
And they can say what they want and say toxic masculinity all you want, but there has to be a correlation between fatherless homes and the way that we raise kids today. That has to be, because if men and toxic masculinity was a negative thing, we would be better off. We are not better off. Right. So removing fathers from homes seem to be leaving more holes socially and much more mental disorders socially. And they don't talk about it that much, but maybe they should.
Yeah, and it's being part of it is because there just isn't that balance there, right? That balance is important. We know that there has to be balance with everything. So as soon as it becomes uneven and there's not that not respect, but there's not the discipline or something's a little bit different. It's just identified differently. But yeah, I think that for sure, and when things are out of balance, things go kind of crazy, and that's kind of where.
If you look what you do, you run a martial arts studio for 2 decades plus, I think now.
Yeah.
But what do you teach? You have one archetype of the sensei, you have discipline, and there are rules that the students have to follow in order to accomplish their goals. That alone is setting something positive to all your students. And like that it's myself. Like, I can understand that, but that is not the norm. For the people that are in the swarms that are doing this to people, not people that would be at your club or people that are disciplined in general. Yeah, so I did have another question. If you are to be swarmed, how would you defend yourself?
So it's a pretty hard question to answer because you have to at the same time figure out who you're being swarmed by, how many, right? The severity of what's going on, if there's going to be weapons, because you don't know that there's not going to be, right? Anybody can have something they can use. Like knives are pretty common. What do you do? I guess it's per case. It's not like a cookie cutter effect. You're not going to do the same thing in every case, but I guess try to create that opening to get away if you can. But I mean, if they're a bunch of teenagers, they can run faster than you. You're going to have to stand and fight. And I guess at that point you decide which one you're grabbing first. So,
they have this idea, this fallacy that if you hit the first 2, the rest will follow. That 30% won't fight. I don't know if true. Well, I don't think it's true either. I mean, it depends on the people that are involved. Yeah, I don't know if that stays. That's a statistic that is really sound, because I don't think there's many reasons how that could be broken. Okay, let's take my bodyguard one. If you're in a bodyguard working professionally for any particular high-level VIP, and you're in a war zone or a dangerous country like Africa, like I worked in South Sudan and Juba, then you're dealing with a terrorist unit that probably are all extremists and probably would all fight you at that time. Now that's a far one, but what about a gang in the United States? That's a very dangerous situation.
Same thing. They're like a pack of wolves, right? They're not going to leave their pack.
Yeah.
So if one goes down, the rest are probably going to stay to fight. So yeah, it's a very good point, actually.
And I did have an anecdotal story to this. Exactly.
Sorry.
When I was a kid, we were doing, maybe you've done it too in your school, how to defend multiple attackers, right?
Yes. Yep.
So I was in Hamilton training with someone we won't mention. And, but as a young kid, I was 13, 14 years old, maybe 15. And there'd be 3 or 4 of us trying to grab one of the guys we're training with to see if he could defend himself.
Mm-hmm.
Number one thing that person defending himself could not let anyone grab onto him. As soon as you get grabbed and someone's able to grapple you, say you had 4 people around you and you're getting their arm locked up, or what I used to do is just double leg and grab for a single.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a kid. I don't know how to wrestle, by the way. I just figured if I could hold the mobility, the 3 other people could work their job.
Right.
And it was so effective. As soon as the person that was trying to defend themselves could not move one limb,
right,
down they went, because it was no longer, which would be probably your primary concern, is not to get grappled and fall to the ground, which would be the other problem. Right.
100%.
I don't know what you did you have any experiences like that?
No, but I know that from training that once someone, like I said, once 1 or 2 people get a hold of you, you're in a lot of trouble, because you no longer have the ability to fight the same way you did, and your balance is affected, your equilibrium, your mental state is affected, and then you can't fight back the same way. So yeah, I totally agree with that statement. Once you're grabbed onto, if you've lost your limbs, basically you're at the mercy of what's happening at that moment. Hopefully you're in great shape and you're strong, and maybe you can break one of those holds off. But if you're not, you could be in a lot of trouble pretty quick. It's just not a good situation.
Size would matter too. You have a couple students or friends that are really big men.
Oh man,
it would be harder. I guess in that case, size would make a big difference.
Oh my God,
it'd be a big advantage if you could move. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
So, wow. Okay.
And then I was going to say, lastly, the worst possible scenario for military, civilian, it does not matter. Policing, do not go to the ground. And as someone that I don't have the luxury of working with a club and dealing with people like you do, but training people to try to get back up, and then it's weird because you say I could be wrong on this. This is just where my mind went. But if I fell to the ground and I say don't grapple, but then you fall to the ground, then you have to grapple your way back up. So it inverts itself.
Yes.
Because you can't have 3 people just keep whacking on you, right?
No.
So then you're gonna have to grab something. So it's weird to say don't grapple, but then when you fall to the ground, you have to grapple your way back up.
Yeah, right. Because
I can't think of another time, because I'm trying to imagine a way that you would be surrounded and it wouldn't actually make sense. That's the only way I can imagine getting back up, is leveraging body parts to climb back up.
Yeah, otherwise you're going to get punched and kicked and hit. So it makes complete. I mean, nobody wants to really be in the ground. I do believe you got to know what to do when you're there to get yourself back to, like you said, back to a safe spot, which would be back to your feet, because multiple attackers on the ground is going to be a bad day. You're basically cooked unless you can't get back up. So you can turtle and defend as long as you want, but I mean, eventually it's going to just be bad. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense, actually. So,
I guess if I had any advice to anyone that would be watching or anything, is escape or be vicious.
Yeah.
That really is your only 2 options. But then being vicious, that would mean I think everybody should always maintain health and fitness, power, strength, and train at the best level that you're able to, because you can't be vicious if you don't practice being vicious.
Right.
So it comes down to that people have to want to put the work in on a regular weekly basis to have skills. How do you get those skills? Come to you, train at your club, acquire these skills, that one day you don't need them, but it's better to have them and not need them, and then need them and not have them. So, because other than that, or you're gonna have great genetics, like some of your students I've seen that are like 6'6".
Yeah,
That's
I don't.
you got God-gifted genetics. Right?
Yeah. I don't have the luxury of. I'm not 6 feet. I'm not a big guy, so.
For me either. So,
but I mean, so training. I mean, you got to train like, and you know, the vicious part is true. I mean, you know, you got to train to be able to flip the switch. You can be the nicest guy ever, but in the moment, can you flip the switch? And you don't know until you have to use it. But you got to have the skills to back it. Otherwise, you'll never be able to do it. So, you know, I think the biggest thing in a situation is if you've never been in one, you're going to have a fight, flight, or freeze response, and you maybe won't know until that time, which is a really, really crappy time to find out, but it could happen that way.
Because I went down a rabbit hole. I've done this a few times. It's one of my hobbies. Of watching YouTube videos of people around the world giving you advice in these situations, and they give the same advice we just discussed because it's a very what if situation.
Right.
So I mean, it could be 3 people, 6 people, 2 people, and then age, weight. There's so many variables that it really comes down to the individual. Actually, I was going to mention this to you too.
Yep.
There is I don't know his name, but there was an ex-Delta Force, Green Beret, Navy SEAL type dude, about 55, 60, early 60s, still built. And he was on the Joe Rogan podcast because he's a bit extreme in his like videos.
Yep.
But he has these martial art or self-defense videos where he always says you have to be your, how does he phrase it? Your own protective executive. I'm screwing it up, but I can't do him justice right now. But basically what he explains is you have to be your own close protection unit, your own executive thing. So you always have to be aware of your own surroundings. So he always takes his car, he puts a first aid kit in. He always leaves his tank of gas up above half for the emergency. And then he's always like, you know, he'll sit at a building in a restaurant and pick a place where there's an exit, because he's his own protective services of his own life.
Right.
Most people are kind of just on their phone, and they don't have the, you know, stuff. So he kind of just comes in, but he does it with kind of a humor, but he's absolutely accurate on what he's saying, that people have to take this and mean it. And it's getting worse and worse, especially if you lived in a city like Chicago or Oakland, where they defund the police.
Right.
And some of those cities in the US,
it's
getting
no
police. Could you imagine?
No, it doesn't make any sense. I think the other thing too is we didn't mention this, and this would be another topic for a different day, but you know, going by your intuitive judgment and your intuitive thought, most people ignore things happening before they happen. So there's usually precursors to situations. People tend to ignore them because everybody's thinking, well, it's a good person, that's never going to happen. He looks like a good guy, or vice versa. And the next thing you know, they're in this big bad place where things are going really bad quickly because they ignored the signs that were there, right? So intuitive judgment is super key, and maybe a super key issue to preventing some of this stuff as well, seeing before it happens and getting away. You know, your gut's usually right. So and your body does that for a reason. It's pretty primal. So,
and I guess last I was thinking is I watched videos, and you probably have done scenarios like this. I know I have, where like in a self-defense scenario, you have people that are coming at you and they're kind of chest bumping you, and you know you're already in a problem.
Yep.
When does that person decide to attack? Does he plan to attack after he's been hit, or does he plan to engage knowing that it's already in a situation? And what are the use of force laws of someone? I would assume, as a retired military police, that if you're already circled, that threat presence is already done. So you hitting first is already expected.
Yeah,
but it's kind of a situation.
Right.
They're in your face. You can't go anywhere. When do you think is an appropriate time to attack? And actually, we could do something on that. And then, because it would be probably the next, you assess that you're in a problem. When can you physically start getting yourself out of it? Like,
right.
At the escalation level.
Yeah, exactly. You know, that we should do it. We should do it as a topic as well, for sure. So cool. Why don't we end it on that part for tonight?
Okay.
And then we'll meet again. So the second Wednesday of each month we're meeting, but this would be for FSD Nation members, and as we grow this for YouTube as well. So thanks a lot, Matt. And
Yeah, that's fun.
we'll be in touch, but I'm gonna just stop us there. So thanks again, everybody. And we will see you next month on the 8th of March, I do believe.
Yeah, I would love to come down. It gives me a reason to get out of the house. I mean, I don't know what this. I have